Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome back to another video. My name is Hydra and we are talking today about Dark Heresy 4th edition. And before I get anyone's hopes up, you haven't missed 3rd edition, and I'm afraid no one officially is making the 4th. This is a homebrew of what I believe that the 4th version, or 4th edition, of Dark Heresy may have been like. And granted, this is completely subjective, and this is my opinion, but what I'm going to be running through is what I believe the lessons learned from Warhammer Fantasy, which, bear with me, I am certain is at least the brother, half-sister, or maybe sort of cousin, maybe a little bit removed from Dark Heresy. These two systems are D100 systems firstly, so they have that in common, of course, but they have very, very similar and very easily adaptable rule systems to each other. So honestly, I think that the adaptations made from Warhammer Fantasy between 1st and 4th edition, you can take a lot of those lessons and apply them to Dark Heresy. Now, you could certainly argue for better or for worse, but in my humble opinion, Dark Heresy is a little bit grey around the edges, and it has a few quirks which me, as a player, I would very much suggest homebrewing around. And I think rather than doing that, there is a system that I find more efficient. So what I have basically done is I've taken it upon myself to take all the things I love from Dark Heresy, the characters, the armory, the bestiary, all of the equipment, just all of the fun stuff, and shove it in a system where I love the rules. And here we are in Foundry Virtual Tabletop with a bunch of characters, a bunch of enemies, a bunch of drag and drop things which Foundry can do. If you haven't seen that, check out my other videos. So we can bring up our medic, we can say, oh, look at that, he doesn't have the hardy talent. Let's give him hardy, there you go, now he's got plus toughness, bonus wounds. Let's give him some feudal world plate armor in his trapping. So you go drag and drop, now he's got feudal world plate. Now you can see his encumbrance has just shot up, he's over encumbered because he's not actually that strong. By the way, got a working encumbrance system factoring in kilos in this. Really pleased with that, thank you Moo-Man. Anyway, back to work. A quick talk, guys. This video won't be able to go through every single rule and what's different and why is it different. This is a little bit of a provisional showcase as to why I think this is awesome, why I think it's a good homebrew, and why I think some of these rule changes could be applied to any campaign very easily and would just make everything a lot better. You don't have to go as ham as I have with creating new classes, careers, and a system that is very different in terms of progression to the previous game. But personally, I thought the attribute system was far too complex. I thought it was too maths heavy, too restrictive, and kind of told you what sort of character you were in terms of roleplay before you'd even done anything. And that might not be a bad thing, but if I wanted to be a melee wielder, I wanted at least a little bit of choice. If I wanted to be someone that could do melee and medic, I didn't want to have to be a person from here that did this and did that and had this person for a nanny as they were growing up. Not for me. I like the idea of a little bit more customization, but believe it or not, the career system does actually offer a bit more customization than this. We could go through how and character customization in another video. Let's go through a few of the basics as to what I think's really helped the game. Firstly, we can go through and we can look at the fact we've got some additional skills which really help some of the old school you have to have willpower or you're going to get a party wipe sort of situations. So willpower, aka used for fear resistance, or basically is your fear resistance unless you have a talent or two. Now we have a skill on top of it, so you can put, if you don't have willpower on your class, fine, you could pay double for it, or you might have, I've called it Valor because cool didn't seem right. Cool seemed too fantasy and twee, and there were other words that I couldn't use because they were used for other things already. But anyway, we got Valor, so I can put a bunch of things in this, and there you go. Now I've got 43 resist, so now I can roll my Valor, and there we go. There's our roll over on the side, -3. There you go. I'm running away in fear and terror. But for me, it means that classes that don't have willpower aren't going to be bent over and just sent packing every single time that there is an opponent that causes fear. For me, fear was a bit too much of a TPK mechanic. Also, I really like the fact that you've got Fortune, Fate, Resolve and Resilience from Warhammer Fantasy. What does that mean for 40k players? Basically, it's a lot simpler than it looks. Fate, burn a fate point, you died. Fine, easy. Fortune, rerolls per session. Simple. Resilience can mitigate something that is incredibly nasty. You lost an arm in a critical hit. Fine. burn a resilience point. Resolve, immune to psychology for 1 round. So a few extra tools to deal with these situations, and it means as a GM as well, it's not just a case of throwing an enemy at them and it may be going absolutely horribly wrong for them and murdering everyone. It's you throw an enemy at them and they'll probably deal with it, but they'll get whittled down slowly, and for me it leads to a bit more of a gradual decline of a character over time rather than this incredibly spiky you got killed by a random auto pistol shot that by someone that wasn't even aiming for you, etc. Let's go through to ranged combat now, because something else that's pretty big that I've shifted is from a D10 damage system to an SL damage system. So what this means is your success level adds additional damage. How well you hit determines how much damage you did do. Now, obviously it's going to be within reason, because the D10 was from 0 to 10, or 1 to 10 rather. The SL system is from 0 likely to 7, because by the time that you've gone fairly close range and got yourself a plus 20, by the time you've done a few other things like this, you're going to end up being rolling on a fair amount. You've also got the skill combined with the ballistic skill, so you've got a high, fairly decent number to aim for. So 0 to 7-ish, okay, fine, the damage has been brought down a little bit. What have I done is I've just added 3 to every single ranged weapon's damage, and it seems to have worked out about right, so the average character with an auto gun can shoot at someone in flak armor, and you've got a choice. You could do full auto, which is going to be minus 20 to hit, which will mean though that you do less damage per hit, or you could do one shot with a plus 10 to hit, compared to the full auto would do plus 3 damage if you hit them. Does that make sense? Basically a potential plus 3 damage anyway. So basically how well you hit and how good you are at shooting can determine how much damage you do. For me anyway, I like this, and it means that players have a little bit more thought, and it means that the closer you go, the more damage you're going to do to an enemy, the further away, the less damage you're going to do. It's going to be less sporadic, whereas the old system is basically you have a 10% chance of doing 1 damage and a 10% chance of doing 10. I didn't quite like that, because it really was just... your character just gets mowed down every now and again in a rather hopeless fashion, and you didn't feel like you were in much control over it. Whereas if you're getting shot by an enemy in the distance in this, and you're fairly heavily armoured, it's less likely they're going to do as much damage. Although the crit system's still there, and it could still do a horrendous amount of damage. Anyway, we have an opposed test system too. So let's say my lieutenant over here is going to go on his combat tab and roll his chainsword. He's got one advantage, because he's already charged in before we started this scene, because this is actually broken down in super slow-mo. Anyway, he's got his one advantage, which gives him a modifier of 10. He's actually attacking a large target too, which gives him another 10. So we're going to give him another 10 here, bringing him up to 20. The advantage is automatically calculated in, and there we go. So there's his damage. His damaging quality is the same as tearing. I just had to call it damaging for this because it's based on a sort of a macro that's built into this. Anyway, that's coding stuff and complicated, and I don't really understand it, but it's all built in. So basically, he did 11 damage. That's all you need to know. And now we do an opposed test. So the big burly militant is going to roll in response, and he's going to roll. There you go. He rolled a -0. Why do they always do that? There you go, -3. There you go. So that 11 damage. 12, 13, 14 damage now to him. What's so nice about this? Well, actually, we can just do this. We can do an opposed test against him here. I can right-click and click apply damage, and now he's actually taken the damage. That's really cool. Still working on implementing the penetrating feature. That's going to be here within a couple of weeks. But an automated system where you don't have to look up his armor values. It's already calculated. You don't have to, provided that my character here, my lieutenant, goes on his trapping sheet and remembers to actually equip his flak armor, which for some reason has an encumbrance of 2, which is far too light. We'll have to fix that. Should be 11 kilos for standard Imperial Guard flak armor. We have that going on there, and ignore the fact that there's still brass, silver and bronze pennies. These are some older characters I was playing with. But anyway, a system here that I think opposed tests really helps, because a nice addition to this is the fact that a medic can come along, and provided that this is something appropriate, the militant can attack. I love opposed tests. Okay, fine, he attacks with that. Now your medic might say, okay, I don't maybe have a good dodge. My dodge is 40. Can I oppose with inquiry? And at that point, the GM says, well, how are you going to inquire your way out of this? Of course not. Slap. And then you go, okay, right, okay, well, what else could I argue? What else could I use? I could do melee basic because I've got a dagger in my hand. I could do Valor by standing there and be brave. Fine, stand there and be brave while he hits you. You die in one hit. But you can actually try and use different things to oppose him. Now, a Malaton's not a particularly good example. If the guardsman was trying to attack him, you could maybe oppose it with barter, if it was someone that could be opposed. So your incredibly good negotiation skills could be used to oppose his melee test. Again, GM permission. But I love the opposed test because it allows characters that aren't necessarily combat savvy to do something other than combat within combat. Something actually I thought Wrath and Glory did quite well with the interaction attack system. It means that in theory, if you're fighting a servitor, you could maybe, provided you know about servitors, oppose an incoming melee test with a tech test. Maybe. And that could, again, it's down to the GM, but I love opposed tests because I think they really give characters the opportunity to do something more interesting in combat. Absolutely awesome. Now, of course, we've got the armory in here. We've got all of the items. As I say, all of the items. We've got a hell of a lot of items. Got a whole bunch of cultists with different guns that I've already included, so we can just stick out a champion. He comes pre-equipped with a power fist and a bolt pistol, so he's going to hurt. There you go. And auto gun. There you go. And there's someone here with a heavy flamer too. So I've got a lot of these rules figured out, and I'm really liking the way it's looking. So I think it's going to be a little bit more of a let's say a less spiky game. So for those groups in Dark Heresy that quite like the idea of having a combat every session, it's going to have less character deaths per session, but your characters will get whittled down slowly over time. We will have a system where criticals are very, very punishing, and they can cause you a hell of a lot of problems, and you will accumulate wounds and injuries over time, but it won't necessarily be this, now you burn a fate point, that's one of your 2 fate points gone. Equally, I don't like this whole rolling for wounds and rolling for fate points. I'll call it as it is. It's garbage. I don't like it. The fact if you roll a 1 for wounds is ugh. I love the fact that Warhammer Fantasy wounds are based off of strength, willpower, and toughness. All 3. Double toughness, single for the others, based on the bonus. Anyway, I really like that because if you don't have toughness, it doesn't mean you're absolutely shafted for wounds. One of many things I like. But anyway, we're going to be doing a one-shot of this in 2 weeks' time. So I'd invite anyone that's interested in seeing how this all works to come along and check it out. 3 PM UK time on the Saturday. This coming week, however, we're going to be doing and continuing our Warhammer Fantasy campaign, so feel free to check that out too. But this will be a good opportunity to showcase how the system works in combat. We'll be using a few rules, using a few fun things just to make it a bit more interesting, and hopefully not TPK everyone, but hey, if we do, then it could be fun. I think it should be good. I think it could be fun. And this will be available for download soonish. It kind of already is, but it's not at a point where I'm that comfortable yet. So give me a little bit more time to get this to a polished state. But if you do have any questions in the meantime, hit me up in the comments down below. If you want to see a video on character creation and how I'm tackling that in this system, if you maybe have some concerns about character diversity and you're like, well, hang on, if my character is going to be something like I don't know, if I'm going to be one of the careers and one of the Militarum careers, which starts as a conscript ends up as a guardsman, corporal, sergeant. That's how you promote. Of course, you could go laterally. So if you're a guardsman and you're absolutely terrible at being a guardsman and they really desperately need field medics, fine, change over to a field medic. Change over to a band-aid. Like, don't limit your players by careers. Make a new career. And if you're like, man, I'm really bored of being a guardsman, could I switch? Okay, fine. Let's figure out a narrative way we can switch you from being a guardsman to something else. So as you can tell, the settings, I'm kind of building it around the pre-Dark Heresy bit in the backstory. So this is what you were doing before you were a guardsman. My plan for a campaign will be that sort of a quarter of the campaign will be pre-inquisitorial stuff. Then the Inquisition will come along, and then you're doing post-inquisitional stuff. In which case you'll keep your previous skills that you've accumulated. You can still work on those. They form your backstory, as well as the actual backstory stuff that I've got in character development. And then you'll gain a rank of being an acolyte, or an interrogator, or one of the various other things that you could be doing for the Inquisition. An investigator. You could do many things, and this will sort of allow you to paint a story of a character that I think anyway is far more interesting than the attribute system, which quite frankly was just too much maths, didn't like it. Anywho, guys, I hope you find this interesting. Stuff will be coming soon, so hang on in there, and again, hit me up down in the comments if you've got any questions or things you'd really like to see next. Have a great day. Take care.